Alpha.
Ladies and gentlemen, a very big warm welcome to Sony Southeast Asia Alpha 7S Mark III Imagination in Motion, live sharing by industry experts event. My name is Juliana and I'm going to be your host for this morning. We are very honored to have you here with us today. For attendees who are joining from Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand, you may toggle the button at the bottom right of your screen to choose to display the subtitles in your language. You can also toggle your video quality settings to 720p at the bottom right as well. We will be having two different industry experts today to share their thoughts and experiences on Sony's latest edition, the Alpha 7S Mark III. And we hope that you would gain more insight on how the Alpha 7S Mark III can bring your video creation to the next level. There will also be a panel discussion at the end of the sharing session where you can ask any queries to our speakers and product manager. To send in your questions, you can submit them in the Q&A box, which is located either on the right-hand side or the bottom of your screen, depending on the device that you are using. A poll will be conducted during the sharing session, so please do keep a lookout. It will appear below your video window. If you have your video on full screen, do minimize the size so that you'll be able to take part in the polling. And of course, to begin today's session, I would like to invite Mr. Cho Bing Han, Head of Interchangeable Lens Camera Marketing of Sony Southeast Asia, to say a few words.
Thank you, Juliana. Hello. Welcome to Sony Southeast Asia Alpha 7S Mark III webinar. Thank you for joining us today. Just recently, we have announced the launch of the Alpha 7S Mark III that many had been eagerly anticipating. It brings the legendary S-series sensitivity and dynamic range to unprecedented levels, while boosting speed and processing power to give you supreme imaging performance and workflow efficiency. Whether you are a production house with a crew, a one-man operation, or a wedding video creator, you will find many improvements on the Alpha 7S Mark III that are valuable to creators like you. We are very happy to have two renowned industry experts with rich filmmaking experience with us. Joining us today is Den Lennie, a film producer and director who works with professional camcorders like the Sony FS5. Also joining us, we have Brandon Lee, a filmmaker and director who operates with a very small crew, often as a one-man operation, and specializes in run-and-gun style of work. Hear their experience with the Alpha 7S Mark III and find out how it fits into their different professional workflow. We hope you will find the next hour enjoyable and informative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Bing Han. And it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, Mr. Den Lennie, a video producer, business coach, and marketing strategist with over 25 years of industry experience. He has written 3 books on the business of video, hosts a weekly podcast, and has spoken on the subject at various events around the world. Dan will share more insights and how the Alpha 7S Mark III fits into his production workflow seamlessly.
Well, good morning, everyone, from a very sunny Sunshine Coast here in Australia. I am Den. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here with you today and to be able to share my experience with you working with this incredible new tool. Now, I'm a video producer and a DP, and I have always enjoyed working with smaller camera formats. This is actually a frame from a film I made with Bruce Logan ASC, who was actually the guy who blew up the Death Star in Star Wars and filmed that back in 1977. And I had the opportunity to work with Bruce a few years ago. We made a film for Sony in the UK, working on the Sony FS700. Now, to give you some context, you just saw a fraction of some of the work I've done in the last few years. That has all been shot exclusively on Sony camcorders. I have been working with Sony cameras and camcorders since 1994, a whole 26 years professionally. I've been actually working for probably nearly 34 years doing work experience and getting involved in productions, but it's 26 years that I've been earning my living as a filmmaker. Now, I began life working with the Betacam SP camcorders, and that was in television news when I worked for Reuters, the news agency, back in 1994. But as I progressed through my career, I worked for a number of broadcasters and as a freelance cameraman in London. And a lot of the work I was doing back then was on digital Betacam. This was standard definition, 16:9, and we then moved into HD, and then of course into 4K. And I'm so excited to share that over the last 26 years, I don't think I've ever seen a period of such technological development from Sony so rapidly that has ended up benefiting us, the filmmaker, to such a high degree. So some of the images here are from some of the projects we have done over the last 4 or 5 years. We've got me standing there next to the car rig with the FS5. That was from the film Free Spirit that I shot with Mick Jones down in Sydney back in 2015. Next to that is me working with a Movi rig with the Atomos recorder on there, recording 4K out of the Alpha 7S. So it was really only a short time ago when we had to record externally to get 4K from these cameras. And now, of course, we can record 4K internally. The shot next to us is the film that we made just recently for the Alpha 7S Mark III. I've also shot a load of vlogging episodes on the Alpha 7R Mark II. I love to take stills, and so I use that for stills and video. Next to that one is us working with the Alpha 7S, the original camera that I'm actually now using as my webcam, which we shot in Scotland about the smokies and the fishing. And then next to that, we've got a shot from when we shot the FS7 launch film over in Kanazawa in Japan. And I also at one time owned a Sony F5 with, a full cine zoom set and a full production rig. And the reason I wanted to share this with you is to give you some context as to why I use certain tools in certain situations. So this is a frame from a tour I did with Robbie Williams, who's an artist in the UK. You may have heard of him. This was a 2-day shoot at Wembley Stadium for his tour. And I always choose a camera system based on the job or the project. I look for three things every time. Size and portability are very important to me. I want a camera that's small, that fits in my hand, that I can get up close to people and not be in the way. I look for functionality. I love shooting slow motion. I think as creatives, taking the ideas that we have and translating that imagination into film, I call it film, it's digital film, is one of the things that I love so much about working with Sony technology. I never feel like the camera gets in the way. So some of the built-in features, especially in this camera, are outstanding. And then finally, workflow. You know, I see a lot of things being created around the world by manufacturers who claim 8K and 12K, and many people get very excited about that. But the trouble is, those file formats have huge, huge files. And while they might appear like a cheaper option at first, you've got to factor in the storage and the computing power you need to process those kinds of files. And so what I love about the Sony technology is they managed to give you great functionality in a small form factor, but with very efficient codecs. I think that marriage of those three things is very, very important. So here's how I like to work. I like to keep my footprint very small. I like to work with 1 to 2 people at most. I like to use a small monitor here. I've got the Atomos on the camera there, and a compact rig. Now, why is working small so important for me? Well, with less gear, I am more mobile. This was the kit I used to film the film I'm going to show you shortly. A7S Mark III body, 70 to 200 f2.8 Master lens, this incredible piece of glass, the 12 to 24 f2.8 Master, and I used a 16 to 35 for a couple of shots, also f2.8 Master. So no filtration, everything was in camera, and just a phenomenal experience to be able to put everything in a backpack. Now, I'm not a very modern filmmaker, you might say. I don't have gimbals. I shoot on a slider and a tripod and handheld. That's my entire modus operandi. That is how I like to operate. I like to keep things very simple. My feeling is the more technology you have on set, the more things can go wrong, the longer it takes to set things up. And I just personally prefer to keep it very, very simple. Now, for this film, we made a film about a surfer hand shaping a board, which is a dying art here in Australia. So we went into this room called a shaping bay. Now, a shaping bay is dark. The only lighting are fluorescent lights that sit at waist height either side of the room, and they're there so the shaper can see the contours of the board as they're shaping the board. But it's not a brightly lit room and the walls are dark. So when the team at Sony asked me to create a film, I wanted to create a film that was very real, that you might find yourself in an environment where you can't necessarily control the lighting. And so you want the camera to do a lot of the work for you. And that was really amazing for us because the high sensitivity of the Alpha 7S III meant we could shoot with minimal lighting. Now, for the most part, I shot this film at 500 ISO in S-Log3, which is staggering. S-Log3 used to be something you had to shoot at a higher ISO. Now they've worked on the firmware. You can shoot very clean images, get the full 15 stops of dynamic range, you know, at ISO 500. So let's talk image quality. What we're going to do now is we're actually going to play the film that I made called Tinbeerwah, and then we'll come back and talk about the image quality in more detail.
Alpha.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. That was my film, Tinbeerwah. And I wanted to make a film that was represented an essence of the area where I live and allow the images to tell the story. So let's talk about image quality. 15 stops of dynamic range in S-Log3 S-Gamut Cine. We opened the film with the scene from the top of Mount Tinbeerwah. This is about 10 minutes after sunrise. And I wanted to shoot straight into the sun because as a filmmaker, I know that when you have to film straight into the sun, that pushes the camera to its limit. What you can see here is the beautiful sunburst from the aperture blades on that 12 to 24 G master lens, which frankly, if I could have shot the whole film on, I would have been very happy. But 15 stops of dynamic range, you can see the shadow detail in the foreground while shooting straight into the sun. And when you look at the highlights across the whole scene, it's a beautiful tonality. Now, as we talk about tonality, this is a shot of the pencil working very narrow depth of field. This is f2.8, 200 millimeters on the f2.8 G Master 70 to 200. And it's just stunning. The tone, the sharpness, just beautiful. Really faithful skin tone reproduction. I was very surprised at just how good it was. And it's not that the other cameras were bad, it's just that it was something I wasn't expecting. And that's because there's a new 12.1 megapixel sensor designed specifically to be optimized for that S-Log3. Now, one of the most powerful features of this is the 4K 120 frames per second up to 280 megabits per second bitrate. Yeah, that is incredible. Now, I wanted to push the camera here and shoot this electric plane coming down some polystyrene and throwing out very fine particles of dust. That tests the processor, it tests the sensor, it tests the lens, and it tests the ability to resolve detail. And I wasn't disappointed. Of course, high sensitivity and low noise is a given with this camera. This scene here shot at 40,000 ISO in S-Log3. Now, S-Log3 in high ISO means you can see all of the gradation and the highlights of a scene. So if you've got neon lights on the street, you can grade that back. Now, one of my favorite shots of the film is this picture of Bryn crossing this river. And we shot this in 600 megabits a second in all intraframe because you've got moving water, a moving subject wearing black, carrying a whiteboard. You've got small detail in the leaves, paper bark trees, and it's backlit. So we wanted to really push the camera, and this way we could record every single frame, which meant when we got to the grade, we were able to grade everything beautifully. And then the final shot of the film, this is actually a sunrise shot that we cheated for sunset, because in Australia, the sun sets in the west, like it does everywhere in the world, and most of the east coast of Australia is water. So we were able to take this image and cheat the sunset after a sunrise by using some grading. Now, one of the most flexible things about this camera is that you can move between different cameras in the ProCam series. So we were using an FS5 and an A7S, and that meant that we could change lenses very easily, use the same lenses across the entire range of what we were doing. Now, Sony has over 50 E-mount lenses to choose from. Now, what I want to do at this stage is a poll's about to appear at the bottom of your frame. And I'd love to know, how do you plan to use the A7S III as a video camera? Please take a few moments now to have a look at that poll, and we'll come back to the results towards the end of this presentation. So that poll is coming up on screen now. So please do tell us, how do you think you will use the A7S III? Now, one of the challenges that Sony have had in the past has been processing so much information with so many features. Cameras can get a little bit hot. So what they've done is they've completely redesigned the heat management system within this camera, a brand new design of the infrastructure of the camera, the integral structure, still weather sealed, but we found that we didn't have any issues with overheating. We'd filmed for nearly an hour and a half straight with no issues, shooting at 120 frames per second in 4K, 10-bit 422, blew us away. We never ran out of power. I bought 5 batteries for the shoot and we used 2. So as we come towards the end of wrapping up here for me, dual memory slots taking CF Express Type A cards and SDXC. So dual media there. And then finally, amazing XLR adapter that's coming out soon as well, which will give you the ability in the future to record up to 4 channels of audio. So my final thoughts really, guys, are I was absolutely thrilled to be asked to work with this camera. It is absolutely stunning. I'm in love with it. I don't want to give it back. I might just run away with it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dan, for sharing such insightful experience with the Alpha 7S Mark III. Right now, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce to you Brandon Lee, a globe-trotting content creator who has been making films about different people and culture for the past 7 years. He has won awards including Vimeo's Best of the Year, a Webby, and the Travel Video Awards, and has been featured by National Geographic, BBC, Time, TEDx, and the Smithsonian Institute. Brandon, please.
Alpha.
Hey everybody, I'm Brandon Lee, and thanks for watching my video. So, of course, that was shot on the Sony Alpha S3 entirely, and this picture that you're seeing right now in my slide, that's what I normally look like when I'm shooting. I'm usually sweaty, I'm usually running, and I'm usually using a gimbal. So I need a camera that can keep up with me, and I make my films usually out of what's in my backpack. If the kit doesn't fit in my backpack, then I can't use it. But even though I shoot that way, I don't want to compromise. I don't want to compromise the image. I don't want to compromise my versatility. I want to be able to just flow. I want to stay creative with the gear that I use. So I've been waiting for a long time, as you have, for the Alpha 7S Mark III, and finally it's here. And I can say after using it for over a month, it has blown me away. Like, this camera is what I was waiting for and a whole lot more. And I'm going to talk about why. So, I want to talk first about the 10-bit 422 internal recording. The 10-bit internal recording on this camera is of a higher quality than a lot of other cameras in this range, because other mirrorless cameras that have come out recently record 420 10-bit, which doesn't give you as much color information as 422. And that's an important distinction that some people might overlook. So I want to mention that because it helps with the skin tones, it helps with color grading, and it especially helps with any VFX you may need to do in post. Also, the format that you edit in is so easy to use. It's basically just plug in the camera. I have my camera here. You plug it in with a USB cable, or you can use a card reader. You drag and drop your files, and I use Final Cut, and then I just drag the files into Final Cut, and minutes after I've copied my footage, I'm editing. So it's like a constant flow from shooting to edit. You know, when I was filming the film that you just saw with my girlfriend Kobe, after each day of shooting, we'd go back home and I would get myself a drink, I'd sit down, and 20 minutes later, I was already rolling and starting to cut that footage into my sequences. So I stayed in the inspired flow. And that's what's so important to me about having the perfect camera. It has to flow with me in my process. So 4K 120p, 10-bit, 422, internal recording with full autofocus capabilities. What's important about this to me is that I don't have to switch my mindset when I'm shooting. So if I'm thinking, okay, I need this shot to be autofocus and I'm gonna need to grade it later, I'm gonna need to, you know, raise the shadows, something like that. I'm gonna need it to track someone's face. And if I have a certain framing already set, because I'm using a full frame lens, I don't wanna have to switch my mindset and start thinking, oh wait, no, the 4K 120 is cropped, so now I need to walk back or switch lenses. I don't want to think about, oh, now it's going to be 8-bit, so I can't recover my shadows, so I need to frame my shot differently. I don't want to make those compromises. I don't want to have to keep half of my brain thinking about the settings. I want to have 100% of my brain thinking about the film that I'm making and staying in the moment. So having features like advanced autofocus, even at the highest frame rate, and having 10-bit, even in the highest frame rate, are really important to me. So I can shoot high action scenes easily. Skin tones. So I am not a colorist. I am not someone who sits and goes through 50 nodes of color correction and color grading in DaVinci Resolve after I finish. I drag and drop my footage into my editing program. I do minimal tweaks to the color just to sharpen it up, just to brighten it up a bit. And then I want to be done, because I feel like most of the work of the shoot should be done during the shoot. The lighting should take care of it. The subject matter should take care of it. And the camera should capture those skin tones faithfully so that I'm not sitting there trying to wrestle and get rid of a green tint or a magenta tint. You know, that is just such an annoying thing I don't want to deal with. So what you're seeing here is a screen grab. This is an ungraded standard picture profile or creative style image. No grading at all, straight out of camera, no S-Log, nothing. This is what you get in this slide that you're seeing right now. And to my eyes, it's beautiful. This is perfect skin. Dynamic range, same story. I don't want to have to fix the dynamic range in post. I want the camera to record everything I need and display it beautifully and just let me sweeten it up a little bit with my color correction. So in this shot, you're seeing the sky in the background and her skin in the foreground, and they're both looking great. You're seeing detail all the way up to the sun in the background, and you're seeing detail in the deepest shadows of her hair. So the dynamic range on this camera never failed me no matter what I threw at it, and that is such a relief. And the low light, we filmed a moonlight scene for this video, and it was in White Sands National Monument, which is a big, big desert. And there's only one day a month that you're allowed to go there at night, and that's when they have a full moon. So that's the desert scene that you saw in the video. I was shooting at ISO 8000, and I was able to resolve crisp detail. The autofocus still worked. It was able to track her face, and the colors were still rich. And I would say, it's about on par actually with the Alpha 7S II in terms of the low light performance, in terms of how well it shoots in moonlight. But the difference here is it's now 10-bit 422 in low light at high ISO. So when you go to color grade your footage, if you want to change things around a bit, you can do it a lot better than you could before with previous 8-bit cameras. So that low light performance now has much richer color and much more flexibility in the grading. All right, the rolling shutter. We all hate rolling shutter. If you know what it is, then you probably hate it. And I'm happy to say that we finally dug its grave. Rolling shutter's pretty much gone on this camera. You're seeing a frame grab shot at 1/50th second shutter with a 50mm lens out the side of a car going about 40 miles per hour. So, you know, a good road speed. And the signs that were passing stayed straight. They didn't go sideways. They stayed very straight. And when I was shooting high action, I had no jello effect in my shots. If I paused a still frame, it would look like something that was taken with, you know, a DSLR. It would look like a photograph. It no longer looked like a warpy funhouse mirror distorted image. So no matter what you throw at the Alpha 7S III, when you're shooting high action stuff, you don't have to worry about the rolling shutter anymore. Okay, I shoot on gimbals almost all the time. I love gimbals for their versatility because they let me get shots that are otherwise either impossible to get or just very, very difficult and would require a lot more crew. But for a camera to be a good gimbal camera, it has to have a lot of features internally, because gimbals don't do well with big spidery rigs. They don't do well with a lot of external monitors and cables and accessories. It's much more flexible. You'll get much better shots if everything's kept close and tight inside the body of the camera. So it's easier to balance and it's easier to move with. So the Alpha 7S Mark III has a compact body, as do their other mirrorlesses. It has a flip screen, which I'll come back to in a minute, and it has in-body image stabilization. And this in-body image stabilization has an additional mode that they didn't have on previous cameras, which I used in the film that you saw, which is intelligent active stabilization, which gives you a little bit of a crop, but also will take away a lot more of the jitter that will still find its way into your footage, even when you're using a gimbal. Because gimbals aren't completely perfect, and the more the camera can help you compensate, the better. So with that flip monitor, the flip screen monitor that we've all been waiting for, I can finally see what I'm shooting at any angle. And I don't have to hook up an external monitor. And the reason this is important is because if I have to add an external monitor, then it will add weight to the gimbal. And you can see the way I'm holding it here. If I have to hold extra weight that far out from my body, I'll get tired a lot more quickly. My shots will be shakier and I'll have to give up sooner. And I probably won't go for the same kinds of adventurous shots that I like to get when I'm shooting. So external monitor, not a good thing for that reason. Also, external cables on a gimbal will get snagged, will get caught, will get unplugged if you're shooting in crowds, if you're shooting in, let's say, dense foliage, like in a forest, and there's, you know, trees and stuff, like in the film that I just showed you, there were a lot of twigs and branches and stuff that it's very easy to snag the camera on, especially shooting at low angles. So if I don't have anything sticking out of the camera, then I don't have to worry about it. If I don't have any cables externally, I don't have to worry about that. Finally, I want to touch on weather sealing. I filmed in moderate rain. We got caught in a rainstorm at several points actually during the shoot, because this is monsoon season where I am right now in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So yes, this camera did get rained on during my shoot. You're seeing it covered in rain in this shot. And I'm happy to report that there were no problems with operation after it got wet during the shoot, or even now, several weeks later. It's in my hand, fully functioning, no corrosion, no problems at all. So it can withstand that. I wouldn't recommend going scuba diving with it, but I can say that the weather sealing was great for the uses that I had for it. So you can keep shooting in rough conditions. So finally, this is the camera I've been waiting for. I'm pretty sure it's the camera you've been waiting for, because this is a camera that's going to allow me to express myself fully. It's going to become an extension of my body as a filmmaker, and it's not going to be an appendage that slows me down. If I think of a shot, I can go out and I can shoot that shot. And that's what I want as a filmmaker, especially as a traveling filmmaker. I finally have it. So, got a question for you for our poll. What is the one most important feature for you of the Alpha 7S Mark III? I want to hear what you have to say. All right, thanks very much.
You heard the man. The poll will appear below your video window if you do have your video on full screen. Do minimize the size that you'll be able to take part in the polling. So this is actually the second poll that we're holding today. You should kind of know what to do already by this point. Brandon, thank you for sharing your presentation earlier. You know, you mentioned lots of key points, and it seems like you really love the camera. So this one is probably going to be a difficult question for you. If you can just pick one favorite feature, you open the question to the floor. What would the favorite feature for the camera be for yourself?
For me, I would have to say my favorite feature is just the image quality straight out of camera. I haven't worked with a camera previous to this where I could go out, I could shoot, come back and pop in the footage, and every shot would sort of just kind of look right. I don't have to tweak it. I don't have to push it and pull it and try to fix it in post. I actually shot the short film Crossroads in standard creative style. I had log turned off, and most of that film is color graded either very minimally or not at all. That's almost exactly straight out of camera footage that you saw there. So the fact that I was able to do that, and if I want to change the color, I have that 10-bit flexibility, that makes this a total win for me, because I can have the confidence to trust that the image I'm seeing as I'm shooting is going to be even better when I go to edit.
So what are the things that you typically spend the most time on, usually when like in post?
In post, well, aside from just watching all my footage and trying to pick the best pieces of it, I spend a lot of time, or I have spent a lot of time with other cameras on transcoding and getting it into an editable format, organizing the footage, and fixing color, sound, fixing basic issues, technical issues like that. That stuff tends to stand in the way of my creative process before I get to the fun part, which is actually putting together an exciting movie.
So this really helps to streamline your process, and it definitely sounds like it.
It just makes it fluid, I mean, I see so many filmmakers who compromise their shots, they compromise their visions just because the camera can't do what they want to do. It won't focus fast enough, it can't move fast enough for them, it's too shaky. This camera, it takes that stuff out off the plate, so you're just focused on what you're making. And I honestly really love this camera, and I don't want to give it back either.
Fantastic stuff. Okay, we've heard from the floor. Let us take a look at the results from the poll. Let's see what people have to say. So what is one most important feature of the Alpha 7S Mark III that you appreciate the most? And we've got 8% of people saying 4K 120p. All right, and you'll be able to see what's next as well. The 10-bit 422 recording, as you did mention earlier. A lot of it pretty technical. Okay, Brandon, what do you think?
On my current screen, I can't read those results. Do you mind refreshing me on a few of them?
Okay, so the top feature is actually the was it the 8K 120p recording?
4K 120p.
Yeah.
8K
4K 120p.
In a few years.
Yeah. So that's one of the
120p,
most important features.
The great thing about the 4K 120p on this camera is that it has a tiny, tiny crop. That's it. Otherwise, it looks the same as the 24 and 30p. So if you decide to shoot 120p and then in post you don't want to keep it as 120p, you just want to make it regular speed, or you want to make it 50p or 60p, there will be no loss in quality. There's no trade-off in quality. That's what's really great to me, is because I don't feel locked in to that 120p decision, and I don't feel like I'm giving up something in terms of the quality of my image just to shoot a higher frame rate.
So great to have all this interaction from the floor, and I really enjoyed your presentation along with Den's presentation as well. We know that by now you probably have some questions to ask our guest speakers. So also joining us in this Q&A panel discussion, we do with Brendan and Den, we do have Matthew Hui as well, and he is of course product manager of interchangeable lens camera marketing, Sony Southeast Asia, and he'll be taking charge of all the product technical questions.
Glad
So
to be here.
hi Matthew.
Hi.
Okay, and we're open to questions right now, but of course, we're going to bring back Den on screen so that he'll be able to answer some of the questions as well. I've got the first one for Den. Den, I know you've been shooting for a long, long time. You've got a whole lot of experience using different cameras, Sony cameras, professional camcorders, and the like. So tell us, what features of the Alpha 7S Mark III do you actually appreciate the most?
Well, I mean, as I'm getting older, my eyes are not getting not as good as they were, and that as a filmmaker is quite disturbing when you can't focus at close distances. So for me, the very, very high density pixel OLED EVF here was an absolute saving grace for me. I was working a lot with an external monitor, but sometimes I just wasn't getting into the position I wanted. So I took everything off the camera, put on the 70-200 f2.8G master, and just shot like I was taking stills. And that allowed me to get the camera in exactly the right position to get the shot I wanted. And so for me, that's something that was really, really helpful. I think the other thing, to mirror what Brandon was saying, is the 4K 120p, 10-bit 422, 280 megabits a second with the most beautiful sensor. It is exactly as he said. You shoot and you bring it into Final Cut Pro, and it just looks beautiful already. And even working with S-Log 3, I did some basic correction in Final Cut, just adjusting the shadows and the highlights and adding a bit of saturation, and it came back looking amazing. But when I passed that over to the colorist, he was able to extract so much more from the footage. So to have the ability to perhaps go out and shoot, just in a standard profile or use S-Log all in the one tool is just incredible. There's never been a camera at this price point that does so much.
Glad to hear that, because basically it's the first time ever that we have this QXGA EVF, so that it helps you for your shooting and stuff like that.
Sounds fantastic. Okay, I've got the next question for Brandon as well. So, Brandon, earlier on we saw your film Crossroads, and we know that a lot of your films are very like run and gun style. You use the gimbal a lot, and even in the film earlier we saw that you shot in moonlight. So we've got lots of low light scenarios. So how important is autofocus for you with your experience, especially in the low light conditions with the gimbal?
Well, autofocus is essential with the gimbal if you're going to do complex movements. And if anybody in the audience, if anybody has seen my videos, I do very complex moves with gimbals, and I rely heavily on that autofocus. And for instance, the moonlight shot that started behind Kobe, that was my girlfriend in the video, the shot that started behind her and then moved around into a close-up on her face could only have been achieved with this camera, not just because of the low light, but because it was able to keep her in focus throughout the shot at f1.4. With another camera that didn't have such reliable autofocus, I would have had to stop down. And when you're shooting by the moon, you can't stop down. You're gonna get a black lens cap image if you stop that down. So basically, I had nowhere else to go. I had to use my autofocus, and it had to work perfectly. Also, the park was closing in 10 minutes while I was shooting that. I had 3 takes, and my first take was perfect. The second and third take were just for safety. So I didn't have to do it multiple times just to make the AF work. The autofocus nailed it.
Great.
Fantastic to hear that. No pressure, right? The park closing. And of course, I've got
a lot of pressure. But we got it, yeah.
That's great. So I've got one question for Matthew here as well. Matthew, can you tell us what is new about the image sensor?
Oh, okay. I believe a lot of people also wonder what's new about this sensor. So actually it's same but different, I would say. It's still a 4K sensor. It's still running on 12.1 megapixel. But basically, we completely newly developed these sensors. So it's a back illuminated sensor, which first time ever that incorporate into Alpha 7S series. And with that, this new sensor, basically we can increase the data rate so that we can pack the focal face detection inside our sensor itself. So working together with our Beyond 6-hour processing engine, so basically it works for taking like capturing 4K 120p, 422 10-bit, 15 sort of dynamic range with autofocus still on, without any pixel binning. So that's one of the reasons why we have this 4K sensor. And on top of that, actually another reason is that we can increase the, light capability efficiency. What I mean by that is it greatly increases the high sensitivity performance. So with that, you can shoot in low light with very high ISO with very effective noise control. So I believe all these features will be appreciated by many of our videographers together with still photographers. And I think that's the reason for having such a 4K sensor inside the Alpha 7S Mark III. And I believe you guys also pushing the camera quite a bit. Like you're shooting in moonlight, you're also shooting, then also shooting in very tight space with very limited light conditions. So is that working for you? This sensor is noise control is good, no light sensitivity. Is it working well?
Maybe let's hear from Den.
Absolutely. You know, we pushed ourselves into an environment that I knew was going to be very challenged.
Yeah.
We could not control the lighting. Yet we shot everything at only 500 ISO in S-Log3, which was quite impressive. You know, I expected to have to shoot at a higher ISO, but we actually were shooting mostly at f2.8. So that combination of those G Master fast lenses at f2.8 and the 500 ISO gave us an incredible marriage of the technology and the environment. And, you know, we always want to try and shoot in as low an ISO as possible to keep the image as clean as possible. But even when I shot my exterior nighttime shots, we shot at 40,000 ISO, 40,000 ISO in a street scene. I was shooting at like f5.6, f8. I was shooting in S-Log3. And what's especially useful about using S-Log3 is that you've got the 15 stops of range. Now, you might think at nighttime there isn't that much dynamic range, but when you're seeing shop signs with back illuminated writing, sometimes on a standard profile, that might get crushed and compressed, and you might see a bit of clipping. But with S-Log3, you get gradation all the way through to the highlights. So you can grade that image back and get a much more pleasing image. So yeah, it's very, very impressive.
Great.
Okay, so right now, if you do have any questions pertaining to the Alpha 7S Mark III and filmmaking production workflow, do feel free to send in your inquiries via the chat box, and our industry experts will be more than happy to share with you their insights. And of course, we do have many questions coming in. I've got the next one in for Den as well. Somebody do want to find out whether your film was shot on the H.265 or 264, and if it's 265, how was the editing workflow?
So the simple answer to that was it was shot H.264, which made the editing workflow very, very straightforward. Yeah, we shot it all in 10-bit 422 in the, I can't even remember which format we used, but see, I'm not a very technical filmmaker. I don't even know half of the technology. And I'll tell you why I shared that so openly, is that with Sony doing all this work behind the scenes, I don't need to know it. I simply need to select a setting. I think it looks good, I bring it into the Final Cut, I cut it, I grade it, I export it. So I'm pretty sure, and maybe Matthew can back me up here, but I'm pretty sure I shot 10-bit 422 at 280 megabits a second, 120 frames per second. I think that was H.264.
I think that's the new H.265. If it's
okay.
like XAVC-HS, so
Right.
it will be, it will be H.265.
Okay, so that's what I used, and it cut absolutely fine in kind of Final
Do you
Cut.
find it
no
any
issue.
difficulties with like editing and stuff like that?
No, I mean, I nothing at all. It just works. I've got a 2018 MacBook Pro, cut it on that using an external SSD. It was absolutely fine.
Great to hear that.
Okay, and I've got another question in here, this time for Brandon. So earlier on, we were already talking about autofocus in low light on this very camera. The question actually asks Brandon, does the Alpha 7S Mark III autofocus well in low light settings, even when we need ISO around 8,000 to 12,800?
Well, the ISO that you saw was ISO 8000.
Wow.
In that moonlight shot. So yes, the autofocus does still work in really low light. And the ISOs are going to be different, by the way, if you're shooting log versus shooting non-log. So I like to get the same brightness with as ISO 8000. If you're shooting log, your ISO will be a lot higher. But I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I believe the effective performance of the camera will remain just as good in terms of autofocus and everything, because it's just shuffling around the dynamic range. Is that right?
Yeah, basically it works for all range of ISO. So even you push to the max like 40,000, it still works. Yeah.
Basically, as long as the camera can see a face, as long as it can visually determine a face in the shot, then it can track a face. If it's so noisy that the face is exactly the same as the wall behind or something like that, then no. But in that moonlight shot, even though her face was the same color basically as what was around her, the AI was still able to see, I guess the facial structure. And so the autofocus still tracked her.
By the way, have you used any light source? Do you use like smartphone light and stuff like that as a light source? Not really, right?
For that shot?
Yeah.
For that scene? No, it was just the moon.
Completely moonlight.
It was the full moon, yeah.
Yeah, so really
Pretty
pushing the camera
To the max.
Yeah, to its full capabilities. Okay.
It really wasn't though, like it sounds like moonlight would push it to the max, but I could tell that if I wanted, I could have overexposed that scene. It would have been a little noisy at that point, but it would have been still a usable image, even a bit brighter. I chose to grade it down and expose it down a bit because I wanted that nighttime look, but it wasn't the limit of the camera at all.
Great.
Okay, and I've got the next question. This one is more of like an experience question. People want to find out from both Den and Brandon. There are those who are concerned about the overheating of the Alpha 7S Mark III in an outdoor setting, and you guys have certainly taken it out and used it for fairly long periods of time. Can you tell us your experience while working with this camera? How's the overheating? Yeah. Is there any issues with that?
I believe you guys also shooting most of your footage in 4K 120p, so I believe it's the maximum kind of data rate. So how was your experience with it? Den, perhaps?
Yeah, maybe from Den?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I guess you could say that we were revving the engine pretty hard, and I didn't observe any issues at all. The camera never felt hot to me, and we were shooting interior where heat buildup might be a bigger issue. As I say, we shot for the first day of the shooting. We were shooting for about an hour and a half, and I was like, "Oh, I haven't changed the battery," and I was like, "That's crazy." And then the battery died. I'm like, "Oh my god, that's like an hour and a half on one battery." And we were shooting pretty much. The camera was always on. I was shooting with the LCD screen closed, and I was using an external monitor or using the inbuilt monitor, EVF, and like we didn't have any issues. It wasn't an issue. The camera never felt warm. We're shooting at 120p. I mean, just no issues whatsoever.
Great. Brandon, how about you? I think you're shooting under the desert, so how do you feel with it?
All I can say is that I overheated before the camera ever would. I had no problems with overheating. I was sweating like crazy. It was exposed to direct sunlight in the middle of summer, in the middle of the desert for up to 3 hours at a time, not rolling 3 hours continuously, but it was in direct exposure. I wasn't putting it back in my bag between shots. Even handheld, even at 120p, it never overheated. The body did start to feel warm after a while, but that's probably just the black body absorbing the sunlight.
Yeah.
It didn't seem to be radiating heat.
Yeah, especially this product is a newly form factor, so that we can do a lot more efficient heat dispersion. Yeah, So for this even high bit rate like 4K 120p, even direct sunlight or even very high temperature, we're able to have a very good heat control. Yeah.
Also, it's passive cooling, which is important because it doesn't suck up battery power. That's why I think that's part of why the battery is so good on this camera, is because you're not powering a fan that's spinning all the time. Yeah.
I think that's certainly great news for users out there who are interested to get this camera. No overheating issues. Yay! Okay, and due to time limitations, we will be taking in the last two questions. I've got one for Den over here. Somebody wants to know, how do you manage colors with those fluorescent lights in your shots? Do you correct it in post, or do you actually set the white balance on the camera and just throw it in post?
So I never white balance, ever. I shoot either tungsten if I'm indoors. If it's tungsten source, I shoot daylight if I'm outdoors. And I like to do that so that every single image I record, I know is 5600K. And that means that I've got a base when I come into the grade. Now, that particular scene, we chose to really push the camera because it was backlit, lots of fine detail. Those are called paper bark trees. They grow out of the creek. They've got very, very fine paper-like, tissue paper-like texture. And I encourage everyone to make sure you watch this in 4K and study it, because what we then did is we had a static shot on the 12mm on the slider, very slow creep at 120 frames per second. Then we moved to a whirl cam light, which was a cable cam that we strung between the two trees, underslung the camera, and tracked the camera across the creek at 120 frames per second as Brim was walking across the creek. And I wanted to push the camera hard. So the processor was working very hard. We were shooting at 600 megabits and all intra frame, which meant when we got to the grade, we had every single frame recorded. And we could still pull keys from the green leaves and actually adjust specific colors and shades. And the image held up very, very well. We were very, very impressed. All internal recording.
Nice, great to hear that. Okay, and the final question I actually have for Brandon. So we've got this question coming in. I can see that you're really satisfied with the color processing capability of the Alpha 7S Mark III. It's vari-angle LCD, it's stabilization, you know, you've got the whole presentation. They want to know, however, is there anything else that you wish to have in the Alpha 7S Mark III?
I mean, there can always be more, I guess. It could come up with good ideas for movies. But other than that, I mean, this camera ticks every box that I think is practical for a camera to tick in this day and age. I can't imagine it being able to do much more technologically. It is not 6K, okay? It's not 6K internal, but the 4K is so sharp that you can zoom, you can crop without the audience noticing pretty far. I would say up to maybe 150%, it would still look fully 4K, just throwing out a number. But that's about all I can think of that maybe I would want added, you know, in a future camera, is higher resolution for archival purposes, for cropping in post, etc. But other than that, I love it. I get to keep my same batteries, and it has a full-sized HDMI out. So I love those features just from a convenience standpoint. Those are things I didn't expect. So yeah.
Yeah, a lot of people comment that the full-size HDMI is really working for them, especially when they're doing like a raw output and all this. Yeah.
Sounds like a fantastic package. And early on in Dan's presentation, we did open a poll as well. Let us actually pull out the results on screen. Let's take a look at what you guys have to say. So the question was, how would you use the Sony Alpha 7S Mark III as a video camera? And it seems like, ooh, we've got lots of aspiring influencers in the house watching here today. Content creation for social use came in at 8%, followed by commercial projects, and then short films, weddings, events, and more. So, then your audience.
It's pretty diverse.
Yeah, they're influencers. They're all creating content for social.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's probably a better question for Brandon. But what I would say is that this camera is very, very capable across any of those genres.
It's crazy because it's like having a cinema camera that edits the same way as the old 8-bit footage from 5 years ago. Like, it's so easy to edit the footage. You don't have to process the raw and take all that extra time. So I feel like I'm cheating almost, because I can shoot a YouTube video with like an image that to me looks like it came out of a top quality cinema camera with all that color flexibility. So it's just so great, yeah.
Especially the color science we borrow from our very top of the end, like Venice cameras together with FX9. So yeah, I believe a lot of people also comment that the color science, the skin tone is a lot more improved. Yeah, it looks like a Hollywood camera.
So it was fantastic to hear from all of you, and I would like to thank our audience for the spontaneous questions as well. Our sincere apologies that we are unable to address all of your queries due to time constraints, but for media-related queries, our corporate communications team will be reaching out to you separately. So we do hope that you've enjoyed this session, and of course we would like to thank Dan and Brandon once again for sharing their expert insights. You can find out more about the Sony Alpha 7S Mark III from the links below the video player. Kindly do also take some time to fill up your feedback for this sharing session below as well. Let us extend our appreciation to all of you for joining us today. Have a great day ahead.